So after I got kicked off the IMF job for asking for a raise after being abused, cornered, shouted at, cussed out and everything over there at that doghouse, and just ripped off good over there. That entire time I had commuted, like I said before, I commuted from Charlottesville every single day for 5 months on that job. So I went from there to the IMF, arriving 6 a.m. in the morning and getting home back in Charlottesville at 8 p.m. at night, waking up at 3 a.m. every night to go to work. And my wife was still working at UVA, being shouted at, and that was about the time that Mark Bowman did his impersonation of a lawyer, and the cover-up began of the grant fraud and the contract fraud with Pfizer and NIH and all that stuff. That's where McDonnell and Cuccinelli and Lynn Fleming and Teresa Sullivan, all of them circled the wagons on that mess with Mark Bowman. They knew what they were doing, and the dean, Dukowski, who's down now at the University of Florida. That was the same time that my wife was suffering with her hair falling out and the shouting and getting cornered, putting over on the side with no work to do as a postdoc fellow, while while the Indians and the guys get to do work. Just a terrible, terrible scenario. In fact, while I was writing about that time, right about that time, after I obtained this job, and I'm going to come to this point, I can't remember if I was going to the IMF or if I was going to Smithsonian on this particular point, but I have to bring this up. When Mark Bowman impersonated a lawyer, I was driving to work, and so the day after he impersonated the lawyer, and led me to believe that he had just sandbagged my wife and cornered her, with my wife sitting alone after I had demanded to be in the meetings to protect her from that exact kind of thing. And he said that. I assumed he was telling the truth. And so the next morning on the way to work, after I got up at 3 a.m., I was passing Culpeper and just going over this one ridge as you pass is one of the exits there where they have the star up on top of the crane. And I was so angry, I slammed the steering wheel thinking about that, and I started having chest pains down the side right here. I thought I was going to have a heart attack, and I slowed down and was about to pull off the road, and then I started to recover because I still had to make the van pull to get to work. And that was right at the tail end of that IMF contract where they were throwing me off. So I was under enormous stress to have a job. So then I got a job with Infostructures to do Smithsonian migration. Now the Smithsonian migration works this way. They've got locations in Massachusetts, New York, Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And so they have blocks of units or models that they do every summer where they migrate and upgrade a certain set of computers. And they called it the PDR-HP project. So the work is done over at L'Enfant. Now before, I'd been taking the van pool from Warrenton on up to the IMF. In this case, instead of where I'm still coming out of Charlottesville, I instead drove all the way to Vienna and then took the Orange Line all the way around the city over to the L'Enfant and the Capitol Gallery building. And now my commute, instead of being 6 hours a day, round trip was 7 hours a day. So I was hired as a tech, and right there in late June, I think around the 17th or so, we went out to Rockville, and we had this so-called sexual harassment training, and we had this talk. I said, well, if you need somebody to lead this project, I can help you because I've had a lot of experience with these things. No, we've got Ben Bernstein over here. Okay. So we get out on the project, and Steve, I won't say his last name, but Steve was a person who was a Smithsonian employee who had been the point man for the migrations all those years. So you have Steve, you have Vince Stroman, and then you have Randy Bender. Now, Rafael Pena one time when I was talking about Vince, about telling him stuff, he did this, meaning in one ear and out the other with Vince. And that's going to come into play in a bit. I'll explain something that happened. Randy, all the Smithsonian people and all the infrastructure people said, don't upset Randy and don't give her too many details. Terrified of a person, a GS-15 Kotar, and I'm supposed to be afraid of somebody. I should fear somebody. And again, as I said before, don't give me that government crap that it's a government worker and that's their structure. That's a load of crap. It is everywhere. People think that somehow management by fear, management by anger is how things go these days. And that's why we're in the pinch we're in this country. There's no productivity. It's just viciousness and retaliation. It's not about work. It's about trying to avoid being fired or becoming like one of these domestic terrorists, as I would call them. So anyway, we start doing the work, and it was very easy. So in some cases I did, instead of doing 3 per day, I did 5 or 6, 4, 5 or 6, depending on how it was going. The only holdback was getting the appointments lined up because Ben couldn't keep up. And so here it was, we had only been in the game a couple weeks, and Ben now, around July 4th, is going to take a 2-week vacation to Europe to go to London. Here he is, project manager, or in this case, team lead, as it was supposedly called. And he's taken off. Now, what was really ridiculous was they gave him a cubicle, and it was literally this wide as my shoulders. In order to run something of this complexity, you have got to have dual panel LCDs minimum, and really would be better if you had triple, because there's so much detail. You're talking about having upwards of 40 spreadsheets open at one time to manage. 40 different locations to migrate a few here, a few here, a few here. Because each year they're getting different models. They're not all congregated in one place. They're all over the place. So then they bring in this guy, Josh. Josh was not enthusiastic about doing this, and people had spoken the devil about the person who managed these projects in the past, that they just, nobody wanted to do this particular task. One day we're going down to an African art museum. We're down in the basement, and we're going around to one of the maintenance facility sections in there, and we're going to do their migrations. And Josh came back over to the shop to pick us up, office, and so we're all walking together. There was 3 of us. There was Max, Joel, him, and myself. And Josh seemed, for some reason, to want to talk about a particular black woman, and she said, "Can you believe how big her ass is? It's so big." It just went on and on. It's like, what was the point of the sexual harassment training we had back at the office there just a few weeks before? It was unbelievable. At the same time, too, near that time, Joel and Josh and I were walking across the National Mall, probably to Natural History or someplace like that. And Joel takes it upon himself, Joel Guads, a regular employee, to start talking about that Josh lived in Pennsylvania, and that's above the Mason-Dixon line. And Joel says to me, "That must make you angry because you're from Virginia." Now that's a point right there, because when you find people from Maryland and people above there, they've got a real bent against folks from the South and from Virginia. They really, truly hate Virginia. And they don't have any qualms like Tanika, or Ed Chee, or Dan Knight. They have no qualms about showing their teeth on these matters. So, so then we go along. Ben comes back. We're going along, and he's just struggling the entire time. Now, things are not going right, according to Guy Wasserztug, who's the president of Infostructures. He tries to say, along with Vince and Randy, that there's supposed to be, and Ben, 50 machines done per week. So they have this little curve right here. This is what you call an earned value curve. And you see there's 2 of them in here. There's projected and there's actual. The actual one is the one below. This is under Ben's work right here. You can see how low the numbers are. So here comes Wasserztug to me and says, "Well, I'd like you to take over for Ben." Ben's 26 years old. He's over his head on this matter. He said, I meant for you to be the lead on this thing the whole time. So there right off starts lying to me. That's the way Guy was. So when I took over in August, around first part of August, Ben hands off the project and he has nothing in the queue. Has no reservations made for anybody for the next, even for the very next day. I have to scramble to find work, and I need to find 9 machines instantly for these guys to do. No help from anybody. Just suddenly dumped on. And so now that I'm the lead person and Ben is gone, they have to hire another guy. So they do, but he doesn't have clearance to get into, for example, American Indian Museum or Natural History. And each one of these locations, nobody tells me, has to have, you have to fill out a form so that they can get clearance, and that takes a couple of days. So instead of standing at the office doing scheduling, as I was supposed to be doing, and then, you know, taking care of managing the project, now I've got to babysit these people on site. And the distance to walk there is 20 minutes minimum to any one place where you're going, because the museums are so spread across the National Mall. You've been there, you know. Whether it's it doesn't matter, any of the facilities. It's just, it's absurd. And some of them further away than that. So then, it is really a struggle to get things going every day, because people make appointments and they cancel them, and then now I have to find spares for these guys to do, because I'm supposed to be hitting this number of 50 per week. And at American Indian, for example, they drag their feet, giving me, okay, this group right here is ready to go, or this group over here is ready to go. They drag their feet on that, and so I had to start switching up museums so I could have a large enough pool to put one person over here or put some people and keep them really busy to make these numbers every week. And then Max starts coming late, and I don't mean a little bit late, I mean an hour, 2 hours late, even showing up at lunchtime. And he comes in one day after he had just been married and gone to Aruba, and he's got scratch marks on his face where he'd been in some sort of fight. And so finally I have to fire him. And it took forever to get rid of him because he wouldn't come to work on time. So now I'm down to 2 guys, and we still have to make the same numbers. And along the way, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, it turns out that there's not one standard image. Now, the images were supposed to be done, prepared, and then sent out to Dell. A gold master's done, and then Dell would image the machines, and when they arrived, the new machines, they were ready to go. But this was not the case here. And not only that, they weren't doing, the image hadn't been updated for months and months because of Sylvia Knight, who was also working for Infostructures. So we've, later in the year, and I'm jumping way ahead, but I'm making a point, we got to the point of around November, I think it was, that there are special images for the individual libraries inside of some of the museums, 10 or 15 machines total. Well, the image hadn't been updated for 6 months, so I went to Sylvia Knight and I said, I need this image updated because these have come up here. And she refused to do it. So I went to Vince Stroman, and he laughed out loud and thought it was funny. And so he went to her, and she came to a room where I was working and shut the door, and just like the other places, a black woman cornered me and said, you're not worth anything. You think you're so great. You think you don't know what you're doing around here, and you think you're the boss and stuff. And it's like, the image is out of date, and I need to update the image. I'm busy. I don't want to hear it. I told Guy Wasserztug about it. He laughed about it. Didn't do it. No discipline for coming in and attacking me. But see, she's from New York. So I'm going to come back to that. So now going back where we're doing the migrations, and Joel Gwads would not come to work on time, and I finally got to the point where I said, you know, I'm going to dumb down this project to the point where all they have to do is just do the migration. So I started creating tickets myself and said, you all won't touch the tickets. All you do is go out and do the assignment, and here's a sheet. You fill out this information, you give me the sheets, and then I would update and close the tickets with the proper information that was required by Randy. So I had total control of the project and total control of QA. So if they were doing their thing, all I had to do is make the reservations, and they would go out and do the migrations. It seemed like it should have worked. Trouble is, you get down to American history, and they have their own naming convention. So now they've changed the rules. and they say, well, we don't have anything ready. So my guys go down and sit on their hands for the longest time, and I have to pull them off and find another place for them to work. And it's natural history, and it's portrait gallery, and it's all over the place, and Hirshhorn, and it's just one place all over the. And so now these guys that I have underneath me complain because they're going to different places. Like, it's just the way it is. The museum itself, if you think you know so much, try working with these characters right here. Well, we go along, and Joel is getting terribly behind. He gets so far behind, 2 weeks behind, on giving me which machines he's finished migrating. And so that is hurting my numbers for weekly reporting in front of Randy, because I had to sit in front of Randy now with some other folks and you know, to report on the project. Guy, when I first started doing the job, he has the audacity to tell me, don't throw anybody under the bus. So it's okay if people are screwing the pooch, but I have to take the blame for it or cover for them. And that's the way Guy works. It's just like other places. You find one person who's an above average worker, and then you screw them by stiffing them with all the ugliness. And then you tell them to shut up. And if you don't shut up, you're fired. There's a lot of that going on, both in private and public sector. There's a lot of that going on. It doesn't matter if you're working as a contractor or working in a regular company. It goes both ways. You can't tell people, for example, if somebody comes to work who is so stinky that they smell like a garbage dump in a previous job that I haven't mentioned, that I don't mention in any of these videos, but in a previous company where I was a regular employee, in fact I was a manager, the employee smells like a garbage dump. You can't tell him to take a bath. This country's become a joke. The filth and the absurdities of can't touch anybody, can't criticize anybody, that's a load of crap. But anyway, so now Steve was totally fed up with Smithsonian overall because of the BS he had put up with over the years, apparently. And so he had heard that there was an opportunity for him to bail and go ahead and take retirement. And so when that opportunity presented itself, which would have been the end of October, right there during the federal furlough in 2013, he said, well, I'm going to take it. Well, then the furlough came along, and so he had the month off, and he went on and did his thing. The trouble, too, is that when we first started in there, we had a staging room, and I must say that room was probably close to 20 feet by 40 feet, 20 by 30. It was really big. And then it had an appendage over here, which was about 8 by 12, maybe 8 by 15, sitting over here on the side. So here, the main room, and then you have the section over here. Well, they closed off this entire section and only left us with this little bit right here. So that means all the opportunities for imaging or storage or anything were gone. And they were taking all these and converting them into offices. So then, when I took over Ben's job, there was no place for me to sit. These guys had their spaces already, and the Apple guy wanted his corner, and then you have room for 2 more guys. There's no room for me to sit in that little tight space and make arrangements. So I went to what they call the hoteling room, where they had computers on a desk, and I went over to the windowsill, and there's a short, what do you call it, file cabinet, a 2-drawer file cabinet, and I put 2 monitors on the what do you call it, on the windowsill right there on the 4th floor, so you could see it from the L'Enfant exit of the subway. Put my computer on the floor, put my keyboard on top of there, and all my papers, and stuck stuff to the column over here so I could keep track, and that was my office. So I had a chair, and I was working there from about August until late November. That's an ergonomic violation right there. No office space, but they don't care. None of those people out at Herndon, that lady out there, and Randy Bender, they all knew. They don't care. Guy Wasserztug doesn't care. Nobody cares if you don't have a proper office. And there were people coming and going all the time. They knew what I was doing. Guy would come to me and see me every day, every week in there, and see me sitting in there. He knew. All of them knew. Running a project across 3 states for 800 machines, sitting at a place like that. So I was making the numbers, and when those guys, my guys got furloughed, but because of my title, I got to work as a contractor during that month while everybody was off. So I finally was able to get all of the paperwork and everything in order. And about that same time, Randy said, alrighty, April 2014 is the cutoff date for XP, so the following summer's migration, which was XP to Windows 7, they took all of those units and moved it back to October, so now I had 2 overlapping migrations, finishing up one, starting another. You don't give a person more work to do if they're screwing it up. You give them, if you put trust in them or you like what they're doing, then you add more work and say, we're keeping you around for longer. I know you know that, but that's an important point because it goes to my character. I'm the one that's running the project, and I am not some little task lead. I'm driving all over places. I'm picking up used machines. I'm making the schedules, and I'm doing all kinds of outside work for Randy. For example, when we had problems with machines coming in that didn't have updates. And so my clowns over here decide to run updates directly from Microsoft. Who runs Microsoft updates on their personal machine or in a corporation? That is the dumbest thing. If you've worked in IT, you know that is the dumbest thing in the world. You don't do that. That's why you have IT people who go in the back and they receive the Java updates, the Adobe updates, Flash, Windows, you name it. They get them in a little sandbox, they test them out, and then they decide these of the subset of the larger set are the ones we're going to add because we know how they interoperate with all the different applications and websites and everything within our organization. And then they push those out through WSUS, SCCM, some sort of overnight process, Big Fix, you name it. There's a way to get that out. Once you've tested and you say that's the way it goes, you don't go to Microsoft and download 90 updates because half the updates are probably not even hardware specific or relevant to what you're doing. But yet, my guys took it upon themselves and they bellyache and complain all the way to my boss and saying, we're angry because this is not right. Well, it turns out that the WSUS instructions written by the Smithsonian employees themselves were wrong. I get a call from the guy over in Air and Space who had told me he found out that he had done a little scan and that there were 1,300 machines out of 7,000 objects on the Smithsonian network that had the wrong versions of certain software. Well, that's because, and I think it was the browser in particular in this case, that's because you're doing updates the wrong way. The instructions said, run the updates, then put the machine on the network. What's the point of having system admins over in Herndon? Why are they there? They're not doing anything. You're wasting your time. Because the correct obvious procedure, I know you Slashdot guys already know this, you put the machine on the domain so it's talking only to your servers and it's talking only to your internal Big Fix, SCCM, or WSUS servers where the patches are, and it downloads only those patches because you're internal. You're on your intranet, not going outside to the internet, and you put the right patches on there and the machine's in perfect condition for your network. And everything works the way you expect it to across the board and everybody has the same thing. That is called IT management. They weren't doing it. And so Randy Bender comes to me because I pointed out the issue and has me rewrite the instructions and test everything out and reverse everything around as the technical writer. What was the name? Infostructures had a technical writer right there. But no, Randy comes to me and makes me fix it. Totally outside of my statement of work. And then Dell sends in machines, 100 machines across 3 orders to not image correctly. And so then now I have no space for imaging, so I have to go to another room down the hallway and set up an imaging station. So now I'm having to image machines and stack them in the corner because I got no place to put these things. And Guy just says, it's just part of the service. As a matter of fact, when these things are requested to be done, now I'm really jumping ahead. I eventually got fired from the job, but I have to read this testimony right here. Guy tried to tell me that whatever Smithsonian asks, I have to do it. Well, I have the statement of work right here that is very specific. I'm going to come to that in a minute. But I ended up getting fired because I was assaulted by Guy, and I'm coming to that point in a bit. And then when I went to unemployment, he tried to tell them that I violated the employee handbook because I was required to do whatever Smithsonian told me to do. And so I say here, is it my job, this is the actual testimony right here from the Virginia Employment Commission. So I was trying to look for a date here, but it says here, I'm speaking. Is it my job to go through and fix the server update problem with the WSUS server, test it, write the documentation, and lead the meeting on before the Smithsonian for a problem that had existed for 3 years? Is it my responsibility to troubleshoot and fix these problems and these issues that are outside the migration of that magnitude? Then he responds, it's not your responsibility. However, the Smithsonian, at any time you can solve a problem for the customer, increase your value to the customer. It's a value. And then I say, is it not the case that I'm merely team lead and not the system administrator, not the troubleshooter, but it was my job to lead in a very narrow focus, as the evidence shows that I was supposed to merely schedule and oversee the migration and not do these extra tasks? I disagree with your characterization. Well, let's talk about that for just a second right here, about what my job duties were in this particular responsibility, because see, he posted my job after the fact. So here again, he's trying to make me do all this stuff right here. It says right here, Infostructures desktop replacement lead. This is the job. And it says right here that so you need 2 years of managing desktop replacements, migrations for a government enterprise. This is a Smithsonian job right here. And so proven ability to manage a team, superior organizational skills, high energy, exceptional abilities organizing, managing, integrating information from diverse sources, including spreadsheets, report, and software tools, ability to build client relationships, thorough working knowledge of Windows 7, Ghost, Easy Transfer Wizard, remote desktop, Dameware, didn't use that, Office 2010, and the Heat Desk ticket management system. It doesn't say WSUS on here. It doesn't say that I'm going to be it doesn't say in here that I'll be doing imaging. And it doesn't say that I'm the project manager, which I was for that, because it doesn't say that I'm responsible for inventory, which is a point that I'm coming to here in just a bit. So the problem, things got totally out of hand with these guys, where particularly Joel was a very big problem. He was getting divorced, and he would talk to me and say, I haven't had sex in 2 years. I wanted to fire him so bad. I could not get rid of him. And he said, he told me one time we were walking across the National Mall, and there was this young girl going across, and he said, I'd like to have sex with that 17-year-old. Now let me tell you something. Any normal organization would have that person fired on the spot, but they wouldn't fire him. And so I had a talk with Joel about him damaging thumb drives, not finishing tickets, not coming to work on time, migrating a person's computer, talking away and away with a customer for the longest time. I caught him upstairs one time, blabbering for the longest time, not doing his job, and then complaining he couldn't finish the 3 machines in one day, and also updating his Facebook page on the customer's new computer. So I had to sit down with him, and you know, that didn't work out. So in November, he continued on and it was coming late, and so I had told Guy, I said, this coming late is going to stop because I have appointments with these PhDs right here. This is how this product works, the service works. We are going out here doing migrations, and this is the end of the ride. So Joel retaliates and writes an email back, and he says that he's going to throw me under the bus. I'm the manager, and he's going to throw me under the bus. And so Guy takes the bait, and he comes down to L'Enfant angry and calls me in the office and says that I used the sentence I too much. I used the word I too much in a sentence. Well, I am the one who's doing the migrations when these people fail, and I am the one who's doing all the work for both Randy and for all of these other museums who have these quirks where they change their parameters of the normal migration. They want these things done, or they don't have the materials ready, or Randy doesn't have machines imaged properly from Dell and hold them responsible, or where I'm doing pickups, riding around. There's nothing in here about this where I'm riding around town picking up old laptops or delivering people to different sites or going to Herndon and shuffling around and cleaning up their inventory because Steve has retired and now they're putting their duties on my shoulders. Because, you see, what Steve did was that of the set that were migrated, I only did a subset. The rest of these were done by other people. For example, Air and Space did their own migrations, and they were supposed to take my tickets, put all the information that they would, the same like I would do for my tickets after closing out, put it in and close the ticket. But they wouldn't. They would just close the ticket. Wouldn't even put in this new serial number for the new machine. How are you supposed to track government assets by not even putting the serial number? And there's no mention of it anywhere, aside from it showing up in Active Directory. But that's not a tracking system. It's not in the ticket. The record of you migrating the machine, there's nothing in there. It's just closing the ticket. Okay, machine was migrated, close. And then nobody is holding them responsible. Vince Stroman doesn't lift a finger. Randy Bender doesn't have a clue. She doesn't give a rat. How is this my responsibility when this was, Steve was the QA in this person, and now it's my responsibility from November forward when he retired? How did that become mine? And they refused to hire anybody. And they refused my offer to bring me on. Let me take it. I'll take that job and make me a federal employee, and I'll take care of all of it for you. No. We don't have any rec order for a new employee. That's going to be months down the road anyway. So they wouldn't, no opportunity to box in the corner to do all the work of him and these clowns that wouldn't come to work on time. And so then Guy comes in and wants to tell me that I'm using a sentence, spends 30 minutes shouting at me, telling me that I am supposed to, trying to force me literally to use the word we in a sentence. They said, well, we are not doing the job. I'm doing the job. Well, you have to be a team player. Team player my rear end. You've got a bunch of backstabbers over here who have openly stated that they say they're going to throw me under the bus because they won't do their work, and so as soon as they get criticized, they run to you, and you come and attack me. And then finally I said it. I said, you know, the reason you're in here is because I'm from Virginia. You see, you've got these guys who are from New York, from Pennsylvania, from Maryland, and so it's all okay that you let them have a free pass, but you come in and stick it in my face as from Virginia because Maryland people can't stand Virginians. And he revealed. He burst out laughing in my face, and his face turned beet red. And it's like, there it is. Exactly what I figured after 8 years. Many years ago I lived in Maryland. I lived there for 8 years, and there it was. Exactly what I thought I had been experiencing the whole time. Well, as a result of that, I developed a severe pain, which I have to this day, in my lower left abdomen, and I have had to go to a doctor and pay $140, and the doctor said, you need a $3,000 CT scan for that. I don't have the money for it, and that's another reason why I've put up the GoFundMe /FiredWithoutCause site, because I need money to go see a doctor, because I am not well. I have burning pains in my pelvic bone, on my hip bone right here. Pelvic bone, what am I saying? My hip bone. I have pains all down through here. So it's something serious, whatever it is. So what was nice, I guess, in a sense about that downtime is I finally caught up with all that paperwork, and then I had control of both projects. And so by this time, seeing things, reporting to Randy somewhere in December, actually one of my guys who had worked at a law firm who should have known better, should have been a top performer, but he was also a crank and a complainer. He went out to American History and didn't finish the job. And so I had a customer who I could tell by the fact she emailed me, you know, immediately right after migration that things weren't right, that she was going to go straight to Randy, and I had to put that fire out pretty quick. So December 6th of December 2013, I should say, I saw that, so I stopped what I was doing, because this guy, it's just better to let these people go on and just try to get some sort of numbers for the day. So I go across I walk from L'Enfant all the way to American History up to about the 4th floor, and I sit down and I give this person over an hour of my time, because she didn't understand Windows 7. I felt like hadn't been treated fairly, sloppy work. And so I stayed there and I said, I am here for whatever you want. Any question you think of, we're going to stay here until you're completely satisfied and get everything done. And she wrote an email to Randy Bender and said, this guy understands the very essence of how to treat a customer. And I still have that compliment. She insisted. And so I said, okay, this is who you send it over to. That was December 6th. So I worked all through the holidays, and I had told the guys, I said, I need to know what your holiday schedule is so I can know which days I can schedule you and I can work with the people. I need early December so I can get the Smithsonian employees onto the schedule and you get this worked out. They refused. I talked to Guy. I said, we've had this meeting. I told you what's wrong here. They owe me these dates. And so Guy sends a little email and says, you're supposed to do this 2 weeks ahead of time. They refused. And then they started just taking random days off. Just come in a day before and say, I'm not coming in today or not coming in tomorrow, something like that. And I already had a full schedule laid out. So then I have to go do the migration and do the scheduling and go across the National Mall and do this crap myself to keep the numbers up. So it just keeps on. I said, so finally one of the guys quit. And then in January, I have 2 new guys. And I have to train them. I have to get their permission straight. And so it's just a real dog with no help. No help at all. So, oh, and by the way, I should say on the WSUS issue, it wasn't just writing, it was also testing. I had to contact the server admin guys and get their procedures straight, and then I had to test machines on different images because there was different machines, and I had to make sure that that worked, and then I wrote it up. That was, and then Randy called me in a meeting with her brass, with her directors, and I had to explain to them what was being done. So anyway, getting into December of 2013, I take a sheet and I start putting the museum names and then putting the numbers that were left over to do this. Randy takes this and puts it into a spreadsheet and says, for all these museums that are left over and you have these numbers, I need you to update this daily. And I said, I can't do this daily. And besides, it's just not part of my job. So she said, do it anyway. Well, first of all, I don't report to Randy and I don't work for Randy. But again, just like with Guy over here, whatever the customer asks you, if it's keep on adding on, it doesn't matter. Now, the thing is that, putting things in perspective, I mentioned earlier that I've been traveling from Charlottesville. So from July until about late September, I was commuting 7 hours a day from Charlottesville. So I went from tech to project manager during that time. And there were days where I was working 9-hour days or 15-minute lunch because it was just so ridiculously busy. Actually, I had been told that one of the guys who managed a project on a previous year's PDR HP had a heart attack and had to leave. And I talked to another guy, Guy Wasserztug, tried to put me in a pinch and tell me that I'm inefficient, personally attacking me. And so he said, you need to talk to so-and-so who did this years before. And I thought, this is a joke. I already know every aspect of this project. I know what's going on. So I talked to the guy on the phone, and we just had a laugh fest while he sat in the corner and said, well, you need to ask him questions. I asked him about what? What do I need to ask? And so the guy starts explaining. I said, yeah. When the guy started explaining X, Y, Z, I said, yes, and then I did this and this and this. Oh, yeah, you've done things beyond what I did. So why are you talking to me? I said, I don't know. Guy said he wanted me to talk to you. So that was a previous year's migration manager, not the one who had a heart attack, but a different one who was a regular employee, I think with the Smithsonian somewhere else. Either was been hired on, I don't remember what his exact status was. I think the guy's name was Kennedy. But at any rate, so again, up till September, I was commuting from Charlottesville 7 hours a day. I went from regular guy to manager, and these other guys can't even show up to work on time. They're in town. And so I moved back to Stafford, and then my commute went down to about an hour, roughly, 2 hours each way, 2 hours round trip. But Randy making this request. So then the problem with this is that I need to go back to another. Go back to this diagram again here and show you something. So Guy is trying to tell me to update this spreadsheet every day. It's not going to happen. I offer to do it maybe every two or 3 days. But the problem with it is that I'm now doing Steve's job because he's gone. We're out in December now, early January. And when Steve was managing it, he was managing the ones that we were doing and the others were doing. And so I had the worst problem with some of these other people who would not do the migration or update the tickets or give me any report. Days and days and days where I'm expecting numbers from these guys, I'm getting nothing from these guys. And these people are still trying to tell me it's 50 per week. And Guy actually said, oh, well, it's 3 per day, so that's 45 with 3 people. And then I'm supposed to do 5 myself. It's like, ha, as a manager, I'm not doing any such thing. Either I'm migrating or I'm managing, but I'm not doing both. That's what he had tried to pull from the very beginning. This defies, I mean, anybody been to business management school, as I have, BS in business? Yeah, okay, whatever. So now, the trouble is that these other museums, aside from foot dragging, would close the tickets and wouldn't put the information in. So you can't count that ticket as closed. Vince Stroman brought this up and saying, this is a QA problem, and Randy will get angry. Who cares what Randy Bender thinks? Stupid blonde. So the tickets had to be reopened, or they had to be not closed until this was done. Guy comes in, Guy Wasserztug, the president of Infrastructures, comes in and talks down to me and says, you're stupid because all you have to do is just write a script and center it on PDRHP scanning so that every time a ticket is closed, you get a count for every week and you make a report, or every day you make a report. No. You can't do it. I explained you can't do it that way because it violates their own regulations for QA. It's not closed. I have several points I have to enter my tickets. They're not even putting the serial number. I know what I'm doing. I know everything that's going on in this project now by this time, working 9 and 10 hours days. When you are thrust into high pressure situations where you've got to think like this and make something happen, then you learn quickly. You learn things fast forward. And this was about my 10th or 11th migration by this time, so none of this is terribly new to me. Now I'm really getting my roots in this kind of project management. Already had been pushed with the IMF, with all of that running around 10 hours a day and all that long commute, literally running through the hallways. So, over the IMF. So then I said to Guy, I said, one day he comes in for a meeting and I said, I need to talk to you about this. So we eventually go make our way downstairs because the meeting for some reason, instead of the usual 10 o'clock, had been set out to 1 in the afternoon. So he's going to go have lunch before the meeting. So I walk with him down to the lobby of the Capitol Gallery building. And we're having a conversation about this. And I said, I cannot do this every single day. I need you to tell Randy maybe every 2 or 3 days. And he turns and says, you can't push Randy. I never said any such thing like that. I never talked to her that way. You can't push Randy. And then he put his hands on my chest and pushed me. And I stumbled back. And he said, but I can push Randy. Well, when I want to get something done, I don't tend to catch salient details at the moment they happen. They seem to come to my mind as I understand things later after the fact. I see things later. That's just the way I am. So I realized I'd been assaulted. Now I'd already in November gone to the Inspector General and had a preliminary discussion about the abuse of the contract with what was going on. And I talked to them again, here it goes again, that federal law about protection for whistleblowing about abuse of the contract. And they said, well, we can look up the statement of work and see what's going on. Which, by the way, I obtained from a FOIA. So this time I said, this is going to be real deal. So I went and filed a complaint with them and explained that I'd been assaulted. And so the following week, when Wasserztug's come in, I said, I need to talk to you before the meeting. Now, we go over in a side room, and I said, last week we were having a discussion, and you put your hands on me and pushed me. That's assault. And he said, what are you going to do? Have me arrested? It only matters if it matters to you. And so then we discussed back and forth, and I said that He tried to fire me. He tried to say that if you don't like this job, you can quit right now. And so again, it's always constant threats and intimidation from him, because this right here, or this little curve he's got going on, which I'm coming to almost finished here. So he says, he threatens me with my job. He tells me I'm inefficient. Like, yeah, I'm running a 3-state migration and I'm hitting 50 every week, and I've got 2 clowns over here who don't even come to work on time, and I'm doing some of the migrations myself. With all these variables and all this stuff in all these different museums, and I'm doing Steve's job, I'm doing my job, I'm doing the job that used to be done, the previous migration that you did at your office, I'm also doing all that record keeping and everything, and you all just keep adding on stuff. So I tell him that I went to the IG and complained, made a preliminary complaint. He shot out of the room and disappeared for about 10 minutes. So I go down to Randy's office and start talking to her. Randy tells me that there is no such thing as 50 units per week. Randy Bender, the COTAR, tells me that it's only time and materials. There were no numbers the whole entire time. I'm killing myself doing all that extra work, keeping the project on what I thought was on track. And there were no numbers. It was all about his profit. And to make things worse, I got to digress a little bit. Vince Stroman was a nobody there. He should have been taking care of the project and filled in and assigned somebody else. Supposedly Rafael Pena was supposed to take over Steve's job. He didn't do a thing. Vince didn't do a thing. Everybody knew that he would just do things like that. And every time we have a meeting, Vince would come in 5 minutes after the meeting started. So when he and I were interacting after Steve left, this was killing me, because he would come in and make comments and he didn't know what he was talking about. And I wrote an email to Randy, and I said, you know, these meetings here, Randy Bender was so crazy that we would actually all stand outside of her office. And I can't remember if the meetings were 10:30 or 10 o'clock now, but we would stand outside and we would enter her office exactly at 10:30 or exactly at 10 o'clock. Not a minute before, and then they would say, is it okay to come in your office now? That's a prima donna. And yet when it came to the WSUS thing, she didn't know what was going on. And not only that, Randy, and I have the email here, Randy sends me an email one day and said, somebody that's migrated here wants Photoshop 7 and what was it, Acrobat 7 and all these other things installed. And I said, I wrote back to the person, I said, these are old versions of these tools and they don't work on XP anymore. You have to get the new versions, new licenses. And Randy wrote me an email directly to me, not to the app update guys, nobody else, wrote to me and told me, wrong answer, come see me. Well, that's joint employment. I'm on the facilities, I'm reporting to her and reporting to those people all day. That's joint employment. So, I go over and see her and I tell her that what's going on is she's totally wrong, and Randy Bender doesn't even know what applications work on Windows 7 machines. Not a clue. GS15. Take a look at the scale for DC. Go on the internet and look it up for GS15, how much money they're making. All in the name of diversity. Let's get a woman in power and everything and see what she can do. Yeah. It would be better if you just find somebody, irregardless of their race or their color, who is just competent, who can do a job. But no, not in this world today. It's all about correctness. So I go back to my desk and I'm livid. So I go over and look up all of the 4 softwares that were mentioned. The Flash, the everything that she's talking about. And in the blogs of Adobe, they essentially, in one of the places talking about somebody trying to put Photoshop 7 on Windows 7, essentially the person writing the blog in there, one of the MVPs of Adobe said, in so many words, essentially said, idiot. If you're stupid enough, why would you do something like that? And so I just took the links from each one of these responses right here and said, this is what Adobe says about your assertions. So then she has the audacity to write an email and said, I double-checked. Gosh, I double-checked. What a load. Taking credit for my work. After she chewed me out and tried to blame me for her stupidity. And then she tells the customer that indeed you do have to get the new versions. And then for the first time since I worked there, she reveals the link to where you can get software upgrades. Nobody told me. Not Vince, not Randy, not Guy, nobody. A quintessential part of migrations, making sure you get person, if they're here, get their stuff put back, and then tells me then. And I'd been working there, by this time this is December, and I'd been working there since July. I've been the manager since August, didn't say a thing to me. And they tell me I'm inefficient. So going back to the day that I'm now confronting Guy, so he's left the room. Randy is standing there saying, nope, it's just all time and materials. So I go back to Guy, and he threatens me with my job, and he yells at me and says, do you want to keep this job? Do you want to keep this job? And I didn't even know how to answer. What do you mean? What kind of question is that? Yelling at me like that. Well, you better not go to the Inspector General again, because the moment you do, you're fired. And I said, I already have. I went again and I filed a complaint about you assaulting me and about what's going on in here. And so he said, you're fired on the spot. Well, the problem is right here, when you look at this little chart right here, again, this is all made up. This is his idea and have a thing to do with the contract. Because guess what? Here's the statement of work. And what is notable there is no place in here. This is, I want to hold this up with the camera here a little bit because I want to show right here. This is the task order. There's no place in here where I'm supposed to report. In fact, right here, one of these sentences, task order, contractors should in good faith resolve, complete an average of 12 problem and service tickets per day. That's the rest of the help desk that's doing this. This is something. This is the task order I asked for right here, and it shows that the task manager is Vince Stroman, and it shows that the Kotar is Randy Bender right here. So you can see the little Smithsonian logo on this piece right here. But the fact is that it talks about upgrading personal computers, installing memory and hard drives, upgrading operating systems and things of that nature like that. And some of this is mix. But none of this talks about me reporting to her on a daily basis. It's not my job. And so, and I was looking for a specific sentence. For some reason I've lost track of something on one thing, but at any rate, the Virginia Employment Commission refused to give me unemployment benefits because they say I violated the employee handbook by going to the IG. And it's like, that's the most ridiculous pile of crap in the world, because essentially what it says is that all the whistleblower laws in the United States of America are nullified by some sentences that somebody would put in the employee handbook. That's funny. That you're going to supersede federal and state code on that thing, yeah. And so now, here in January, I have a lawsuit I have a case against the Employment Commission. Essentially, what has happened here is that this right here is fraud. This is fraud. It was time and materials. Randy Bender said it herself. There's no 50 units in this task order right here. It's complete fraud. And so for them trying to push me and make me do things that are outside all that extra work that I did, and then attack me and give me a health condition, and then say that you're not entitled to unemployment, no. You crooks over at the Virginia Employment Commission are notorious for this kind of crap. You also lie, telling major lies about the UVA case that we have against you with my wife, where you openly admit and I'm digressing for a second, you openly admit that my wife was a victim of racial discrimination and also was a victim of grant fraud. On page 8 on your own document, you admit this, and then you deny my wife's unemployment benefits, saying she had no cause. She was fired in retaliation over there, and it's just, and then Bill Howell tries to say that none of this can be substantiated. It's in writing. So in the same vein right here, you people at the VEC are a bunch of liars. I don't know what makes you people so crooked. I don't get that. But it cost me dearly. And this is not going to go away. So I did my job, and I will by the way, John Roberts, I know that you can watch this video and that you're the Chancellor of the Smithsonian. You and the Smithsonian are liable for what happened to me, because I was jointly employed. I took orders from your people every day. I met with Vince on a regular basis, continually. I took orders from Steve. I took orders from Randy. I took orders from the various POCs at the different museums over there, from Herndon, making me shuffle their, drive all the way out to Herndon and clean up their inventory back there, reshuffle the inventory room in that back sealed room. You know, and what's really pathetic is that when I first took over and I was commuting all the way to Charlottesville, I actually stopped off at Subway and bought a sandwich for one of my guys, and bought a non-gluten sandwich at one of the health food grocery stores. It eludes my name. It's not Fresh Fields. I forget the name at the moment for some reason. And the next day took it all the way to work and gave it to my guys at work as a kind of a morale booster. And then when they were down for a couple weeks with no work, and I got to work because of the furlough, then after we started working again, we went over to Portrait Gallery and had some work over there. And so in the course of that, I went to NASM, picked up the van, drove them over there, and then we parked in Chinatown. I took them into a white tablecloth restaurant, my 2 employees at the time, and with my credit card. And again, this is, now this time I was living in Stafford by this time, but with my credit card, I had them order something, and then I paid for their meal before the food even came to them. Then I left and went over to Portrait Gallery and met with their POC over there and set everything up, then came back and picked them up and took them over there and had them work, then drove all the way back to NASM and then started back doing my scheduling work. That is not in the task lead's description right there. And you tell me I'm the devil incarnate, you assault me, and then lie to the Virginia Employment Commission about this crap and try to cover it all up? And all of you people, I have seen your faces over there when I bumped into you on the subway, you Smithsonian employees, so you know what went on. You saw me working. And you all stand there just like it doesn't matter. You're all crooked. It's just totally un-American. This is the Smithsonian of the United States of America doing this to me. People are unbelievable. Un-American. And here I'm suffering with a health condition because of this. Now I'm going to keep on with this. So I need help. I need medical help. I need to go see a doctor, and I'm going to need treatment for sure. So if you can go to the GoFundMe /Fired Without Cause. And while you're at it, go to, call up Randy Bender. Look her up on the internet and call her and let her explain to you. And Vince Stroman, let those people explain to you what they have to say. And let their attorneys over at the Castle Building, let them explain to you. Or how about the Virginia Employment Commission, call them up and let them explain to you how it is that contract law can supersede whistleblower statutes of the United States of America in the federal government. Let them explain it to you. And while you're at it, call up Guy Wasserztug over at Infostructures in Rockville, Maryland. Infostructures Inc. Call him up. And call up Ben Bernstein too while you're at it. Call him up. Call Josh. Ask for Josh and ask him to explain to you. Let them work. See what they say to you. Yeah. because you can find the numbers on the internet. Go ahead. Call those guys up and see what they got to say. Yeah, and the VEC in Richmond, the Virginia Employment Commission, their main office, call them up and ask them what's going on. Get out there and do your homework. And anybody can help me, I greatly appreciate it. Thanks.